Hey there, welcome to the Focus Podcast with Taralee. This is the place where we talk about real life, real relationships, and how to grow through it all. If you're looking for simple mindset shifts, better communication, and deeper connections, you're in the right spot. Let's dive in. Welcome back to the Focus Podcast with Taralee. I'm Taralee Eddington. I'm a marriage crisis coach and creator of the Focus Framework. I help couples in crisis rebuild emotional safety, trust, communication, and connection when things feel heavy, distant, or like they might be falling apart. And today we're talking about something that I think is one of the most frustrating and the most painful and the most understood experiences in marriage crisis. And it goes something like this. You have done the work. You've apologized, genuinely apologized. You have owned your patterns. You have made real changes. You're showing up differently. You're managing your reactions. You are trying in ways you have never tried before. And yet your spouse still does not seem to believe you. They're still guarded. They're still distant. They're still waiting for you to go back to the old version of yourself. They're still bringing up the past and not ready to trust again. And if you're honest, part of you is starting to feel resentful about this. Part of you is starting to think, how long do I have to keep doing this before it counts? I've changed. Why can't they see it? How much more do I have to prove? And if this is where you are, I want you to know something. You are not alone. And what you're feeling right now makes a lot of sense. But I also want to tell you something that's going to be kind of hard to hear. And I want to say it with all the care that I have for you because I know how much this hurts. The resentment you're starting to feel, the I've done enough, why isn't it working feeling, that feeling, if you let it lead, will undo a lot of what you have built. Not because your frustration is wrong, but because what that frustration is quietly doing is putting a deadline on your consistency. And a consistency with a deadline is not really consistency, and your spouse can feel that. So today I want to talk about what is actually happening when your spouse is still guarded after your genuine effort, and why trust rebuilds the way it does, what conditional versus unconditional consistency means, and why the difference matters so much, and what to do with that frustration so it does not start running the show. This is deep work, and I'm really glad that you're here for it. But before we dive in, a quick word. I only have a couple spots left in my Couples Marriage Breakthrough program before I close the doors for new clients. So this is a 12-week private coaching experience built around my Focus Framework. This is where we do exactly this kind of work. Rebuilding emotional safety, rebuilding communication, trust, and connection. And it's in a structured, supported way that you can't replicate just by reading the right things and hoping. So if today's episode hits close to home, I really want you to take that seriously. Go to TaraLeeEddington.com and book a consultation call with me. We will talk about where you are, what you have tried, and whether working together is the right next step. Okay, so let's get into it. Let's start with the hard question. You are doing the work. Why is it not working yet? And I want to give you a real answer here, not a dismissive one. When trust has been broken in a marriage, whether that's through a specific betrayal or through years of painful patterns, through defensiveness, emotional unavailability, through broken promises or chronic conflict, or just a slow drift into disconnection, your spouse's nervous system learned something. It learned that this is not safe. And I want you to really understand this. That learning didn't happen in one moment. It happened over time through repeated experiences of something that hurt, something that felt unsafe, something that confirmed that fear. And that learning does not undo itself just because you had a powerful realization. It does not undo itself because you cried and you meant it. And it does not undo itself because you can now articulate the pattern in a way you never could before. It does not undo itself because you are genuinely different. The nervous system does not update on insight. It updates on experience. Your spouse's body is still holding the memory of what it felt like before. And until it has enough new experiences, enough data to start updating that memory, it's going to keep sending the same signal. Not safe, not safe, not safe. that is not your spouse being cruel. It's your spouse being human. And this is the place that is really hard to accept when you are the one in the middle of changing, because it feels deeply unfair. You can have years of insight in a matter of weeks, but trust rebuilds on its own timeline. And it's usually slower than a timeline of your awareness. I want to say that again because I think it's one of the most important things I can offer you today. Your awareness can happen fast. Trust rebuilds slowly. Those two things can be true at the same time. And when you do not understand that, you will spend a lot of energy trying to close the gap by convincing, by explaining, by demonstrating, which almost always creates more pressure. And more pressure is the enemy of safety. Okay, now I want to talk about the trap of wanting credit for your growth. And here's where I want to slow this down because this is where so many people get stuck. You have had real growth, real insight, real change. And because that growth feels enormous to you on the inside, you want your spouse to feel it too. You want them to notice. You want some acknowledgement. You want the distance to start closing. And that desire, I want to say this very clearly, is completely understandable. You are not a bad person for wanting to be seen. But here's what's happening underneath that desire, and I want you to look at this honestly. When you're watching your spouse for signs that your effort's working, when you're monitoring their tone, their warmth, their willingness to engage, and when you're feeling frustrated or deflated when they're still guarded, you have shifted from doing the work for the marriage to doing the work for a response. And those are two very different things. When you are working for a response, your consistency has a condition attached to it, and your spouse can feel that condition, even if you don't say it out loud. Even if you're managing your reactions beautifully on the surface, there's something underneath that says, I'm being patient until you give me what I need. I'm staying calm as long as you are moving in the right direction. I'm doing this work and I expect it to be acknowledged. And when your spouse feels that, even subtly, it does not feel like safety. It feels like a more polished version of that same pressure. Because here's the truth. Conditional consistency is not the same as becoming trustworthy, and your spouse knows the difference, even if they can't name it. Okay, so conditional versus unconditional consistency. I want to spend a little time here because I think this concept is going to change things a lot for you. Conditional consistency says, I'll keep doing this if it's working. I will stay steady as long as you are softening. I will keep my patience as long as I can see progress. I will keep trying as long as I feel hope. Unconditional consistency says, I will keep doing this because of who I am choosing to become. I will stay steady even when nothing is changing on the surface. I will keep my patience because that is the kind of person I want to be in this marriage, not because I'm being rewarded for it. I will keep trying because the integrity of my efforts matters more right now than the result. Now, I want to be really clear. Unconditional consistency does not mean you have no needs. It doesn't mean that you stay in something unhealthy indefinitely without any acknowledgement. Those are important conversations, and we're going to get to those. But in the early and middle stages of trust repair, the question is this: is your consistency something your spouse can count on regardless of how they respond on a given day? Or does your consistency come and go depending on how safe the marriage feels in that moment? Because that is exactly what your spouse is watching for. They're watching for what you do on the days that everything still feels broken. They're watching for what you do when they're not ready to soften yet. They're watching for what you do when you put in the effort and don't get the return you hoped for. And every time they see you stay steady in those moments, not perfectly, but genuinely, the data starts to shift. The pattern starts to look different, and the nervous system begins to slowly, carefully update. Okay, so what is your spouse actually watching for? I want to get specific here because I don't want this to stay abstract. When your spouse is still guarded, they are not just waiting to see if you can say the right things. They're watching what happens when the right things don't produce the results that you wanted. They're watching what you do when you apologize and they are still hurt. They're asking for what you do when they ask for space and it's inconvenient for you. what you do when they bring up the past and you feel like you've already addressed it. They're watching for what you do when they don't acknowledge your growth. They're watching for what you do when you feel unseen or unappreciated or like your effort is going unnoticed. Those are the moments that matter most because those are exactly the moments where the old pattern used to show up. Maybe the old pattern was defensiveness. Maybe it was shutdown. Maybe it was pushing for reassurance until they gave you something just to get that relief. Maybe it was making your pain so big that theirs had to get smaller to make room for it. Maybe it was withdrawing and punishing with silence. Whatever it was, your spouse remembers it, and they're watching to see if it returns under pressure. Not because they're trying to catch you, but because they have been surprised before. They have seen the good patch that turned into the painful one, and they can't afford to be blindsided again. That is why one good week does not rebuild trust. That's why one powerful conversation doesn't change the emotional climate. And this is why the phrase, "but I've been so different lately," lands flat. Because lately is not long enough. Not quite yet. Okay, so let's talk about the part that nobody really talks about, because there's a feeling that can start to creep in when you've been doing the work for a while and your spouse is still not moving. And it's not a very pretty feeling. It sounds like, "I have done everything they said they needed. Why is this not enough?" Or, "Other people would have given up by now, but I'm still here." Or, "I feel like I'm being punished for things I've already changed." Or, "How much longer do I have to keep doing this?" That resentment is real and it's worth taking seriously, not because your spouse is wrong to still be guarded, but because resentment is information. It's telling you something about what you believe your consistency is for. If you are consistent because you are hoping your spouse will eventually reward that consistency with warmth, with closeness or reassurance, your consistency has a transactional quality to it. And when the transaction does not happen on your timeline, resentment is a natural result. And I'm not saying this to judge you. I'm saying it because understanding this is the doorway out of it. That shift that changes things is not suppressing the resentment. It's not pretending it's not there. It's getting honest about what your consistency is actually for. And it's also asking yourself a deeper question. Am I becoming safer because I want to save the marriage? Or am I becoming safer because I want to become someone different? Both motivations can exist at the same time, but if the only reason you are doing the work is to get your spouse back, to get the warmth, the closeness, the reassurance, then your growth is still conditional. And conditional growth does not create safety. It creates a performance, and your spouse has seen enough performances to know the difference. Okay, so what do you actually do when you are in this place? What do you do with that frustration? When you are doing the work and not feeling seen for it and starting to feel like it may never be enough. Here's what I want you to practice. First, name it to yourself honestly. Not to your spouse, but to yourself. I'm feeling frustrated because I'm working hard and not feeling like it's making a difference. I'm feeling resentful because I wanted this to go differently by now. I'm feeling scared. No matter what I do, it will not be enough. So just name it. Get it out of your body and onto paper if you need to. Because the worst thing you can do with frustration is swallow it until it comes out sideways. As sharpness, as withdrawal, as a comment that undoes 3 weeks of progress in one afternoon. Second, I want you to get honest about what story you are telling. Is the story, "My spouse will never believe me, so why bother?" Is your story, "I have already done enough and this is not fair"? Is your story, "Nothing I do makes a difference"? Because these stories may feel true, but they're not facts. They're fear. And when you respond from the fear story, you almost always confirm your spouse's worst concern. Third, I want you to find support outside the marriage. This is the one I really want to press on because if you are processing all of your frustration and fear and doubt through your spouse, if every conversation you need to have about your own emotional state becomes their problem to hold, that is not sustainable. And it's not fair to either of you. You need a place to do your own work. You need someone who can help you stay grounded when the process feels slow. You need support that is not dependent on your spouse being in a good place. And that is what coaching provides. Not someone to vent to, but someone to help you regulate, to help you see your patterns more clearly, and to help you build the kind of consistency that does not crumble under pressure. Fourth, I want you to give your spouse their process. This one is really hard, but it's important. Your spouse's healing is on their timeline, not yours. Some people soften faster. Some people need months of consistent new experience before they can begin to let their guard down. You cannot rush that. But here's what I want you to hold on to. Every time you stay steady when you wanted to give up, every time you regulate when you wanted to react, every time you show up safely in a moment that used to go differently, you are giving your spouse more data. And more data over time is what changes what the nervous system believes is safe. Okay, I also want to speak to the spouse who is on the other side of this, the one who's watching, the one who is still not sure, to the one who has been told things are different and part of you wants to believe it, but you cannot quite get there yet. First, your caution is not the problem. It's appropriate, and you do not owe anyone your trust before you actually feel it. But I also want to offer you this. At some point, healing requires something from you too. Not blind trust and not pretending the past did not happen, and not ignoring your own gut, but small openings, small moments of letting new evidence actually land instead of immediately looking for the reason it doesn't count. Because if the door is completely sealed, if nothing your spouse does can ever be allowed to be real because you're too afraid to be wrong about them again, then trust repair is not possible. And your marriage can't get where you both want it to go if only one person is moving. This is not about excusing what happened, and it's not deciding whether healing is something you're actually open to. And if you are, even a little, I want to encourage you to get support for your side of this too. Because what you're carrying is heavy, and you do not have to carry it alone either. Okay, I want to take a moment here and say something clearly because I think it's one of the most important things to say in this episode. There is a window in marriage crisis, and it's not open forever. When one person is doing real work, when one person is showing up consistently, managing their patterns, staying grounded, building safety, and the other person is not engaging, not letting any of it land, and not willing to get support, eventually the person doing the work runs out of capacity. Not because they stopped loving, but because sustained effort without any reciprocal movement is exhausting. And when that person finally stops, whether they leave the marriage emotionally or physically, that window closes, and it rarely opens the same way. And I'm not saying this to frighten you. I'm saying this because I want both of you to understand that the season you are in right now is significant. The work you do right now or do not do shapes what this marriage becomes. If you are the one doing the work and wondering how much longer you can hold on, get support. You need someone to help you hold steady while the process unfolds. If you are the one who's still guarded and waiting, I completely understand. And when you're ready to engage, even just a little bit, that readiness matters more than you know. And if you're both sitting with this episode right now and something in you says, we need help, please hear that. That voice is right. So before I get to the next part, I want to give you something to take into your week. This is a reflection exercise, and I want you to actually do it, not just nod along while you listen. Get a piece of paper or your phone notes or whatever works for you and answer these 4 questions. Question number 1. In the last week, what has my consistency looked like? Not what I intended, what actually happened. Was I steady under pressure? Was I patient without a deadline? Did I own my reactions when they were not perfect? Or did I start to feel conditional when my spouse did not respond the way that I hoped? Just be honest. No shame here, just information. Question number 2. What story am I currently telling about why this is not working? Write it down. My spouse will never change. I've already done enough. This is hopeless. They don't want to heal. Whatever that story is, write it down. Then ask yourself, is this a fact or is this fear? What would I have to believe about the situation if I removed the fear? Now, question number 3, what does unconditional consistency look like for me this week? Specifically, not in general terms, specifically. When my spouse is still cold tomorrow morning, I will not withdraw. I will say good morning anyway. When I apologize and they do not receive it warmly, I will not make a comment. I will regulate and try again later. When I feel like giving up, I will journal instead of picking a fight. One specific commitment, something you can actually measure. Question number 4, where am I trying to do this alone when I actually need support? Who is holding your frustration? Who is helping you stay regulated when the process is slow? Who is giving you honest, grounded feedback about your patterns? If the answer is nobody, or if the answer is my spouse, which is not working, that is the gap that support fills. I want to close today with an honest word. If you are doing the work and it's not landing yet, I see you. And I want you to know that the fact that you're still showing up, still trying to understand, still listening to things like this episode, that matters. That is not nothing. But I also want to be honest with you, because most people in this place are trying to do something that's incredibly hard, rebuilding trust, changing deep patterns, staying steady in an uncertain marriage without the right structure to do it in. And that is not sustainable. Not because you're not strong enough, but because this work requires a container. It requires someone who can help you see what you cannot see from the inside of the cycle. It requires a place where both of you can slow down and do the real work without the pressure of managing each other's reactions at the same time. This is what my Marriage Breakthrough program is designed to do. In 12 weeks, we work through all 5 foundations your marriage needs to heal: emotional safety, communication and repair, personal responsibility and ownership, rebuilding trust through consistency, and eventually reconnecting with a shared vision for your future. This is not a generic marriage course. This is a personalized, structured coaching built around my focus framework for couples or individuals who are serious about stopping the cycle. And I want to be direct with you. I am closing the doors for new clients very soon, and I only have a couple spots left. So if you have been waiting, hoping the situation will resolve itself, hoping one more conversation will fix it, hoping time alone will do the work, I want to clearly tell you that it probably will not. Time without structure does not rebuild trust. It creates more distance, more resentment, and a shorter window. So if your marriage matters to you, and if today's episode landed somewhere real, please do not wait. Go to TaraleeEddington.com and book a consultation call right now. We'll talk about what's happening in your marriage, what you've tried, where the breakdown keeps happening, and whether this program is the right next step. You do not have to keep running out of time, and you do not have to keep doing this alone. Thank you for being here with me today. I know this episode was a little bit harder one. It asks some uncomfortable questions, and if you sat with those questions honestly, I want you to acknowledge that. That takes courage. And I want to leave you with this. The goal of trust repair is not to prove that you have changed. The goal is to become someone different, consistently, quietly, in the moments that used to go another way. Not because you're being watched and not because you're waiting for a reward, but because you decided who you want to be in this marriage. And you are becoming that person, one steady moment at a time. Because remember, what you focus on expands. When you focus on proving, the pressure grows. When you focus on performing, the exhaustion grows. But when you focus on becoming, really truly becoming, something different can grow. Even here, even now, even in the hard middle of it. So I will see you next time. Thanks for hanging out with me today on the Focus Podcast. If something stood out or helped you in some way, feel free to share it or leave a quick review. It means a lot. Keep showing up, keep growing, and I'll catch you in the next episode.